Officer James Barrett stared at the manila envelope on his passenger seat, its contents taunting him through the thin paper. After 17 years of marriage, Jennifer had finally done it. Served him with divorce papers on his way to work, right in their driveway. The same driveway where they'd shared their first kiss, where he proposed, where they'd brought their son home from the hospital. His weathered hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. The morning sun beat down on his patrol car, parked in the quiet lot behind the Oakland Police Department. Barrett had arrived an hour early for his shift, as he always did, but today it wasn't about professional dedication. He simply couldn't stand another minute in that house, watching Jennifer avoid his eyes across the breakfast table. The divorce papers listed every failure in clinical detail: emotional unavailability, increasing aggression, inability to process trauma. The words from his last psychological evaluation echoed the same sentiments, though he'd managed to keep those results buried in his personnel file. 15 years on the force had changed him, everyone said so. Even his own son, Dylan, had stopped asking to go fishing, stopped sharing stories about school, stopped calling him Dad, and switched to a distant sir. Barrett's phone buzzed. Another text from Jennifer. "Did you sign them?" He turned the phone face down on the console, next to his coffee. Black and bitter, like his mood. The aroma reminded him of countless stakeouts, domestic disturbance calls, and the night shifts that had slowly eroded his marriage. Unit 417, respond to a vandalism report at the Oakwood Community Center. Multiple complaints about graffiti and property damage over the past week. Barrett grabbed his radio, grateful for the distraction. Unit 417 responding. His voice carried the artificial steadiness of a man holding himself together through sheer force of will. He started the engine, but the envelope caught his eye again. With mechanical movements, he pulled out the papers and his pen. His signature looked strange on the dotted line, like someone else's handwriting. 17 years of shared dinners, summer vacations, and Christmas mornings reduced to a scrawl of blue ink. The community center was only 5 minutes away, in one of Oakland's rapidly gentrifying neighborhoods. New luxury condos towered over family-owned businesses that had been there for generations. Barrett had watched the area transform over his years on patrol, along with the rising tensions between old residents and new. As he pulled into the community center's parking lot, the sun glinted off the modern building's glass facade. The place had been renovated last year, part of the city's urban renewal project. Now it stood as a symbol of change, welcomed by some, resented by others. Movement caught his attention. A young black boy, maybe 12 or 13, was playing basketball alone on the side court. Something about the scene needled at Barrett's already frayed nerves. The kid's presence seemed off, suspicious. There had been reports of youth vandalism in the area, usually during school hours. Barrett checked his watch. 2:45 p.m. Schools should still be in session. He watched the boy sink another basket, the ball's rhythmic bouncing like a drumbeat against his mounting headache. The kid moved with the easy confidence of someone who belonged there, but Barrett had learned the hard way that appearances could be deceiving. He reached for his door handle, the metal hot under his palm. The divorce papers slipped from his lap onto the floor, but he didn't bother picking them up. Finally, here was something he could control. Here was a problem he could solve. Here was a chance to restore some small piece of order to his crumbling world. Barrett stepped out of his car, squinting against the harsh afternoon sun. He didn't notice how the heat had turned his hood into a makeshift griddle. He didn't notice the community center membership card hanging from the boy's gym shorts. And he didn't notice the framed photo of the boy and his father, that Honorable Judge William Thompson, hanging just inside the community center's entrance. All Officer James Barrett noticed was another problem that needed solving on the worst day of his life. Marcus Thompson loved Tuesdays. While other kids rushed home after early dismissal, he had these precious hours at the community center to himself. The basketball court became his sanctuary, the rhythmic bounce of the ball a meditation. Each dribble, each shot helped organize the thoughts swimming through his mind. especially today's debate preparations. The role of police oversight in modern law enforcement, Marcus whispered to himself, executing a perfect layup. His father's words from their discussion last night echoed in his head. Always see both sides, son. Justice isn't about winning arguments, it's about finding truth. At 12 years old, Marcus was already making a name for himself in the Bay Area's youth debate circuit, Judge William Thompson's son. They called him, but Marcus was determined to create his own legacy. Next week's debate tournament could qualify him for the state championships, making him the youngest competitor ever to reach that level. He paused to catch his breath, pulling out his water bottle from his premium Nike gym bag, a reward from his father for maintaining straight A's. The evening sun cast long shadows across the court, and Marcus checked his watch. His mother would pick him up in 30 minutes, just enough time to practice his debate points while working on his jump shot. First point, he muttered, dribbling between his legs. Community oversight boards provide essential civilian perspective. The ball arsed perfectly through the net. Counter-argument. Police unions argue this undermines operational autonomy. Another swish. Basketball helped him think, helped him find the rhythm in his arguments. Marcus was so absorbed in his practice that he didn't immediately notice the patrol car pulling into the lot. When the car door slammed, he glanced over, his hand instinctively touching the community center membership card clipped to his shorts. Ms. Regina at the front desk always reminded the kids to keep their cards visible, especially after the recent vandalism incidents. He saw the officer approaching, white, middle-aged, with the rigid posture of someone carrying invisible weight. Marcus remembered his father's advice about interactions with law enforcement. Be respectful, be clear, keep your hands visible, and know your rights. Hey, you. The officer's voice carried an edge that made Marcus's stomach tighten. What are you doing here? Marcus caught his basketball, holding it carefully at chest level. Good afternoon, officer. I'm just practicing basketball. I'm a member here. He gestured toward his membership card with his chin, careful not to make any sudden movements. Officer Barrett's face darkened. School's not out yet. Let me see some ID. Sir, we had early dismissal today. My membership card is right here on my... I said ID. Barrett's voice echoed across the empty court. You match the description of someone who's been vandalizing this area. Marcus felt his heart racing, but kept his voice steady, just like in debate. Officer, I'm 12 years old. I don't have a driver's license, but my membership card has my photo and information. I can show you. Slowly, Barrett snapped as Marcus's fingers moved toward his card. Real slow, and keep your other hand where I can see it. The tension in the air was palpable. Through the community center's windows, Marcus could see Ms. Regina looking up from her desk, her forehead creased with concern. He thought about the debate topic again, the intersection of law enforcement and community trust, and the bitter irony wasn't lost on him. His fingers had just touched the plastic edge of his membership card when Barrett's hand suddenly shot out, grabbing his wrist. The officer's face was contorted, seeing something that wasn't there, reacting to a threat that existed only in his mind. I said slowly. Barrett yanked Marcus's arm, spinning him around. The basketball dropped, its steady rhythm now a chaotic bounce across the pavement. Marcus's debate points scattered like startled birds from his mind, replaced by a single crystal-clear thought. This is what fear feels like. He didn't know it yet, but in the next few seconds, everything would change. The sun continued to beat down on Officer Barrett's patrol car, its hood now hot enough to scorch flesh, waiting like an instrument of fate. 7 minutes. That's how long it takes for skin to sustain a third-degree burn at 162 degrees Fahrenheit. Officer James Barrett didn't know this fact. He didn't know that his patrol car's black hood, sitting in the afternoon sun, had reached 173 degrees. He didn't know that these 7 minutes would destroy multiple lives, including his own. Time slowed to a cruel crawl as Barrett's grip tightened around Marcus's wrist. The boy's membership card clattered to the ground, the photo of his smiling face looking up at the indifferent sky. Inside the community center, Ms. Regina was already dialing 911, her fingers trembling as she watched the scene unfold through the plate glass windows. "Stop resisting." Barrett's voice cracked with barely contained rage, though Marcus hadn't moved except to tremble. The officer's mourning, his failed marriage, his loss of control. It all funneled into this moment, this display of power over a child who'd done nothing wrong. "Please, sir, I'm not." Marcus's plea cut short as Barrett slammed him forward. The boy's free hand instinctively shot out to break his fall, meeting the scorching metal of the patrol car's hood. The sound that erupted from Marcus's throat wasn't quite human, a primal shriek of agony that shattered the afternoon quiet. 3 minutes had passed. The smell came next, the sickening odor of burning flesh mixing with the hot metal and asphalt. Marcus tried to pull his hand away, but Barrett's weight kept him pinned, the officer's face twisted in a rictus of authority gone mad. Tears streamed down the boy's face as he begged, "Please, it burns. Please." Ms. Regina burst through the community center doors, her voice carrying across the parking lot. "Let him go. Dear God, let him go. I've called the police." The irony of calling the police on the police might have been funny in another situation, but nobody was laughing now. 4 minutes. Barrett's radio crackled with response units acknowledging the call. Somewhere in his rage-fogged mind, reality began to seep in. He looked down at his hand gripping Marcus's wrist, at the boy's other hand splayed against the hot metal, at the tears cutting tracks down the child's cheeks. The world rushed back in with horrifying clarity. 5 minutes. He released his grip and stepped back, just as 2 other patrol cars screamed into the parking lot. Marcus collapsed to the ground, cradling his burned hand against his chest, his body shaking with sobs. Ms. Regina ran to him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders, shooting Barrett a look of pure disgust. "What have you done?" she whispered, though the words thundered in Barrett's ears. 6 minutes. The responding officers took in the scene. The crying child, the disheveled Barrett, the membership card still lying on the ground. One of them, Officer Chen, picked up the card and read the name. His face went pale. "Jesus Christ, Barrett," Chen breathed. "This is Judge Thompson's son." 7 minutes. The ambulance arrived with its wailing sirens, but Barrett barely heard them. He stood rooted to the spot, watching the paramedics tend to Marcus's hand. The burned skin had already begun to blister, angry red welts rising on the boy's palm and fingers. Someone was reading him his rights, taking his badge and gun, but it all felt distant, unreal. In those 7 minutes, Barrett had managed to destroy everything: his career, his freedom, and most unforgivably, the trust of a child. But he'd done something else too, something that would ripple through the department and the city itself. He'd given Judge William Thompson's abstract crusade for police reform a devastatingly personal dimension. As they led Barrett to a patrol car, this time as a passenger in the back, he caught a final glimpse of Marcus being loaded into the ambulance. The boy's eyes met his for a brief moment, and Barrett saw something there that would haunt him forever. Not hatred, not anger, but a profound disappointment in what adults were supposed to protect and serve. 7 minutes was all it took to change everything. 7 minutes to turn a routine patrol into a tragedy. 7 minutes to expose the razor's edge between power and abuse, between authority and cruelty. 7 minutes to burn not just a child's hand, but the very fabric of trust between a community and its police force. Judge William Thompson stood at his bench, his presence commanding the usual quiet respect in courtroom 4B of the Oakland Superior Court. The irony of this particular case wasn't lost on him. A young officer facing charges of excessive force during a routine traffic stop. The body camera footage had been damning, showing clear abuse of power that left a teenager with a broken wrist. Given the severity of the offense and the breach of public trust, Thompson began his sentencing, his deep voice resonating through the hushed courtroom. This court cannot ignore the devastating impact when those sworn to protect abuse their authority. His phone vibrated in his robe pocket. Once, twice, 3 times. Judge Thompson never answered calls during proceedings, a rule he'd maintained for 20 years on the bench. But something felt different this time. A parent's intuition, perhaps, an inexplicable tightening in his chest. The phone buzzed again. "This court will recess for 15 minutes, he announced abruptly, drawing surprised looks from the attorneys. Thompson barely noticed their reactions as he strode to his chambers, his law clerk, James, hurrying behind him. 4 missed calls from the community center. 1 from his wife, Patricia. 2 text messages marked urgent. His fingers trembled slightly as he dialed Patricia's number. "Will." His wife's voice cracked. She never called him Will during work hours. "Marcus is being taken to Highland Hospital. A police officer. He hurt our baby, Will. He hurt him bad." The room tilted sideways. Thompson gripped his desk, his knuckles white against the polished mahogany. "What happened?" The words came out as a whisper. As Patricia explained, each detail landed like a physical blow. The basketball court, the officer, the burning hood of the patrol car, their son's screams. The community center director, Regina, she saw everything. "She's riding with him in the ambulance. I'm heading to the hospital now." Patricia's voice steadied somewhat. "Will, they're saying it's 2nd-degree burns, his left hand. Marcus's left hand, the one he used to write his debate notes, the one he'd just started using to learn piano, making their home fill with clumsy but determined renditions of Beethoven's simpler pieces." "I'm on my way," Thompson managed, already removing his robe. James stood in the doorway, concern etched on his young face. "Judge Thompson, should I?" "Clear my docket. Family emergency." Thompson paused, then added, "And James, call Chief Richards. Tell him I need everything they have on this officer. Everything." The drive to Highland Hospital was a blur of red lights and hospital signs. Thompson's judicial temperament, his carefully cultivated calm, warred with the rage building in his chest. He'd spent decades in the system, working to change it from within, believing in the power of measured reform and reasonable discourse. But this was different. This was his son. The emergency room buzzed with activity, but fell oddly quiet as he walked in, still wearing his suit from court. They knew him here. He presided over numerous medical malpractice cases, served on the hospital's ethics board. Now he was just another father racing through their doors, desperate to reach his child. Patricia met him in the hallway, her normally composed features strained. "He's in treatment room 3. They're debriding the burn." She grabbed his arm as he moved past. "Will, wait. There's something else." She pulled out her phone, showing him a video already circulating on social media. The community center's security footage. Thompson watched his son, his brilliant, gentle boy, being slammed against that car. Watched the officer's face contoured with irrational anger. Watched Marcus's hand pressing against the scorching metal. "The officer's name is James Barrett," Patricia said quietly. 15 years on the force. Multiple complaints of excessive force, all dismissed. All buried. Thompson handed back the phone, his mind already racing through the implications, the legal channels, the potential responses. But first, he needed to see his son. Marcus lay on the hospital bed, looking smaller than his 12 years. His left hand was being tended by a burn specialist, the angry red flesh a stark contrast to the white sheets. When he saw his father, his eyes welled up with fresh tears. "Dad," he whispered, "I was just practicing for the debate." The morphine drip clicked steadily beside Marcus's hospital bed, marking time like a metronome. Judge Thompson sat in a hard plastic chair, watching his son's chest rise and fall in drug-induced sleep. The boy's bandaged left hand rested on top of the blanket, stark white gauze hiding the angry wounds beneath. A soft knock at the door drew Thompson's attention. Dr. Sarah Chen, the burn specialist, entered with a tablet in hand. "Judge Thompson, She spoke quietly, mindful of Marcus's sleep. "I have the detailed assessment of the burns. Would you like to step outside?" Thompson squeezed his sleeping son's right hand and followed the doctor into the hallway. The fluorescent lights seemed harsh after the dimness of Marcus's room. "The burns are second degree, covering approximately 60% of his left palm and fingers," Dr. Chen explained, showing him detailed images. "The good news is, with proper treatment and physical therapy, he should regain full functionality. But," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "the scarring will be permanent." Permanent. The word echoed in Thompson's mind. Like the psychological scars his son would carry. Like the mark this would leave on their family. Like the changes this incident demanded. "Thank you, Doctor," Thompson replied, his voice carrying the weight of 2 decades on the bench. "I'll need copies of all medical records and photographs for the investigation." As if summoned by his words, Chief Richards appeared at the end of the hallway. The police chief looked like he'd aged 10 years since morning. Thompson nodded to Dr. Chen, who tactfully retreated. "Will," Richards began, using the familiar name from their 20-year acquaintance. "I came as soon as I reviewed the footage. Barrett's been arrested. He's in custody at county." Thompson's expression remained carefully neutral. "Tell me about his history, Michael. The real history." Richards shifted uncomfortably. There were incidents, complaints about excessive force, particularly with minorities, internal affairs investigations that got buried. "I didn't handle it properly, Will. I know that now. And my son paid the price for that failure." Across town, in a holding cell at the county jail, Officer James Barrett sat with his head in his hands. The concrete walls pressed in around him, but not as tightly as the weight of what he'd done. A guard approached his cell. "Barrett, your son's here." Dylan Barrett, 16, and wearing his varsity football jacket, stood in the visitation room. His face carried an expression James had never seen before. Not anger, not sadness, but something worse. Disappointment. "Dad," Dylan's voice cracked slightly. "Mom told me what happened. To that kid, to Judge Thompson's son." Barrett couldn't meet his son's eyes. "Dylan, he's 12, Dad. He's just a kid. Like Tommy." Tommy, Dylan's little brother. Also 12. The comparison hit Barrett like a physical blow. In his rage, he hadn't seen a child. He hadn't seen someone's son. He'd seen a threat that existed only in his own broken mind. Back at the hospital, Judge Thompson received another visitor. Patricia arrived with fresh clothes and Marcus's debate notebook. "The tournament committee called," she said softly. "They're holding his spot for the state championships. Said he can compete once he's recovered." Thompson looked at the notebook, then at his sleeping son. Marcus had been practicing his debate points about police reform when Barrett approached him. The universe's sense of irony was particularly cruel. His phone buzzed. A text from Chief Richards. "Barrett's asking to make a statement. Says he wants to plead guilty. No deals, no negotiations." Thompson typed back a single word. "Good." In his cell, Barrett had finally found words for his son. "I lost myself, Dylan. Somewhere between the divorce and the job and my own anger. I lost who I was supposed to be. But that's no excuse for what I did." Dylan stood, his hand on the visiting room glass. "You taught me that real men take responsibility for their actions, Dad. So take responsibility." At Highland Hospital, Marcus stirred in his sleep. Thompson immediately leaned forward, but the boy didn't wake. Instead, he mumbled something about his debate points, his bandaged hand twitching slightly. 2 fathers, 2 sons, one moment of violence that connected them all. And in the quiet spaces between hospital beeps and jail cell doors, change was already beginning to take root. At 9:17 a.m., the security footage hit social media. By 9:22 a.m., it had 1 million views. By 9:30 a.m., every major news network was running it on loop. 13 minutes of uncut footage that showed America exactly what had happened at the Oakwood Community Center. Sarah Martinez, Barrett's union-appointed attorney, sat across from her client in the jail's consultation room. Her laptop displayed the viral video, frozen on a frame of Marcus Thompson's hand pressed against the patrol car's hood. "I've watched this 17 times, Martine said, her voice tight with professional restraint. "Help me understand what you were seeing, James. What were you thinking in this moment?" Barrett stared at the screen, at his own face contorted with rage. The man in the video seemed like a stranger, yet he remembered every second, every sensation, every choice that led to this moment. "Play it again," he whispered. The footage began its familiar sequence. Marcus practicing basketball, Barrett's arrival, the confrontation. Then the moment that changed everything. Barrett's hand shooting out, grabbing Marcus's wrist, the violent slam against the hood. Barrett lurched forward and vomited into the wastebasket. "I need a minute," he gasped, wiping his mouth. But Martinez didn't move to close the laptop. "No," she said firmly. "You need to watch it again. Because in 2 hours, the DA is offering a plea deal. In 3 hours, Judge Thompson's legal team is filing a civil rights lawsuit. And in 4 hours, you're giving a statement to the press. So watch it. Watch what everyone else is seeing." Across town, in the district attorney's office, Chief Prosecutor Elena Ramirez studied the same footage with her team. They'd broken it down frame by frame, documenting every violation, every moment that proved intent. "Look at his face here," Ramirez pointed to a freeze frame. "He's not following procedure. He's not even thinking. This is pure rage." Her assistant cleared his throat. "Judge Thompson's office called. He's recused himself from any involvement in the criminal case." "Of course he has," Ramirez nodded. "He doesn't need to be involved. This video speaks for itself." At Highland Hospital, Marcus watched the footage for the first time on his mother's tablet. His bandaged hand throbbed in sympathy as he witnessed his own trauma from this new angle. Patricia tried to stop him, but he insisted. "I need to see it, Mom," he said quietly. "For my debate, for my speech." The video showed details he'd missed in the chaos of the moment. Ms. Regina rushing out the door, phone in hand. Other members frozen at the gym windows. The exact moment Officer Barrett's face changed from authority to fury. "Pause it there," Marcus pointed with his good hand. "That's when he stopped seeing me." Patricia hugged her son close, marveling at his insight. Even now, even after everything, he was trying to understand rather than simply condemn. In the jail consultation room, Barrett finally managed to watch the entire sequence without looking away. The video ended with him being led to a patrol car, while Marcus was loaded into an ambulance. "I'll take the plea," he said hoarsely. "No negotiations, no excuses." Martinez studied her client. In 15 years of defending police officers, she'd never had one refuse to fight the charges. "Are you sure?" "There might be." "My son visited yesterday," Barrett interrupted. "He asked me if I would have done that to his little brother Tommy. That's when I realized I wouldn't even be asking these questions if Marcus had been white, if he'd been my kid's friend, if he'd been human." Martinez finished softly. Barrett nodded, tears finally breaking through his professional facade. "I want to make a statement. Not a PR statement, not a legal strategy. The truth. About what I did. About what we all do when we stop seeing people as people." The video played on screens across America. In police academies, trainers used it as a teaching tool. In community centers, activists used it as a rally point. In homes, parents watched it and held their children closer. But in that small consultation room, James Barrett watched it one final time, finally seeing what everyone else saw, not a police officer doing his job, but a man who had lost his humanity taking it out on a child who had done nothing wrong. The truth, frame by frame, could no longer be denied. The federal courthouse in Oakland hummed with tension on the morning of the sentencing. Camera crews lined the steps, their lenses focused on the entrance like predators waiting for prey. Inside, Courtroom 2A was packed to capacity, with an overflow room streaming the proceedings to twice as many spectators. Judge Gloria Martinez, brought in from San Diego to ensure impartiality, surveyed the crowded room. To her left sat James Barrett, wearing an orange jumpsuit that had replaced his blue uniform. To her right, the Thompson family occupied the first row of the gallery, Marcus's bandaged hand still visible beneath his suit sleeve. Before we proceed with sentencing, Judge Martinez announced, "I understand Mr. Barrett has requested to make a statement, and Judge Thompson has asked to address the court as well. Mr. Barrett, you may proceed." Barrett stood slowly, the chains of his ankles clinking in the hushed courtroom. The prepared statement in his hands trembled slightly, but he didn't look at it. Instead, he turned to face Marcus and his family directly. "I spent every night in my cell watching that video," his voice cracked. "Not because I needed to remember what I did. I'll never forget the sound of Marcus's screams. I watched it to understand why. Why did I see a threat in a 12-year-old boy practicing basketball? Why did I feel justified in causing such pain?" He paused, swallowing hard. "The truth is ugly. I saw what I wanted to see. What years of unchecked bias and privilege trained me to see. I didn't see Marcus Thompson, debate champion and basketball player. I didn't see someone's beloved son. I saw a color, a stereotype, a threat that existed only in my own poisoned mind." In the gallery, Dylan Barrett watched his father with tears streaming down his face. His mother squeezed his hand. To Marcus, Barrett continued, "I know these words mean nothing compared to what I did to you. The scars on your hand will last a lifetime. But it's what I did to your trust, your sense of safety, your belief in justice. That's the real crime. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for understanding. I'm asking only that my punishment serve as a reminder to every officer who thinks power means they can play God with other people's lives." Judge Martinez nodded. Judge Thompson. William Thompson rose, straightening his tie. The room held its collective breath. Everyone expected rage, demands for maximum sentencing, a father's righteous fury. Instead, Thompson spoke with measured calm that carried more weight than any anger could. "My son asked me not to speak of vengeance today," he began. "He said, 'Dad, hurt people hurt people.' At 12 years old, he understands something that took me decades on the bench to learn. This case isn't just about one officer or one incident. It's about a system that takes hurt people and gives them badges, guns, and unlimited power over other people's lives." Thompson turned to face Barrett directly. "Your guilt is personal, but this failure is collective. Every buried complaint, every looked-over incident, every justified use of force, they all led to my son's hand on that car hood. The system didn't just fail Marcus. It failed you too, Officer Barrett. It failed every citizen who deserves both protection and accountability." In the overflow room, police cadets watched intently as Thompson continued. "My son will carry physical scars, yes, but he's already talking about using this experience in his debates about police reform. He's turning his pain into purpose. The question for this court, for our police department, for our society, is what will we do with our scars?" Judge Martinez allowed the words to settle before speaking. "Mr. Barrett, please rise for sentencing." Barrett stood again, shoulders straight, finally meeting Marcus's eyes across the courtroom. In that moment, something passed between them, not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps understanding. The kind of understanding that changes people, that changes systems. "James Barrett," Judge Martinez began, "this court sentences you to 7 years in federal prison for the violation of civil rights under color of law, with no possibility of parole." She paused, then added, "The same number of minutes you held Marcus Thompson's hand against that car." 7 minutes, 7 years. Some symmetry existed there, though everyone knew no sentence could perfectly balance the scales of justice. This wasn't an ending, but a beginning. The start of conversations, changes and reckonings long overdue. 2 years later, Marcus Thompson stood at a podium in the Oakland Police Academy's graduation ceremony. The autumn sun streamed through tall windows, glinting off the badges of 200 soon-to-be officers. His left hand, bearing silvery scars like a roadmap of that fateful day, gripped his note cards. In the front row, Chief Richards sat beside Judge Thompson, both men older and perhaps wiser. Behind them, Patricia Thompson dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. At 14, Marcus had grown taller, his voice deeper, but his eyes still carried the same thoughtful intensity that had made him a champion debater. Before I begin, Marcus adjusted the microphone. I'd like to share something with you. Yesterday, I received a letter from Officer James Barrett. A murmur rippled through the audience. Barrett's case had become required study at police academies nationwide. His name was synonymous with the department's darkest hour and its subsequent transformation. He wrote, "Marcus, I watched the news from my cell. I see the changes happening in Oakland's police force. New training protocols, community oversight, mental health screening, changes that you helped create. Sometimes I think those 7 minutes of cruelty led to years of progress. But that doesn't make what I did right. It doesn't heal your scars. I just hope that your voice continues to be louder than my actions ever were." Marcus set the letter aside, surveying the faces before him. Young, eager, diverse, each one representing the future of law enforcement. 2 years ago, I was just a kid practicing basketball and preparing for a debate about police reform. The topic seemed academic then, theoretical. He held up his scared hand. Now I carry the reality with me every day. But these scars taught me something crucial about power, responsibility, and most importantly, about change. In the county jail's common room, Barrett watched the speech on television, surrounded by other inmates. His son Dylan, now headed to college on a football scholarship, sat beside him during visiting hours. "Your badge," Marcus continued at the academy, "is not a shield from humanity. It's a commitment to it. Each of you is about to receive immense power over other people's lives. How you use that power will define not just your career, but our entire community's future." He gestured to the changes visible through the academy's windows. The new community outreach center built next to the police station. The basketball court where youth and officers played together weekly. The mental health facility that now evaluated and supported officers regularly. These reforms didn't come easily. They were born from pain. My pain, Officer Barrett's pain, our community's pain. But pain can either destroy or transform. The choice is always ours. In her office, Ms. Regina from the community center watched the live stream, remembering that terrible day and marveling at the strength of the young man Marcus had become. Today, as you receive your badges, Marcus's voice grew stronger. "I want you to remember this. I forgave Officer Barrett not for his sake, but for mine. Carrying anger would only burn me further. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning, growing, and ensuring that what happened to me never happens to another child." He held up his left hand one final time. "These scars aren't just mine anymore. They belong to all of us. A reminder of what happens when we forget our humanity, and what's possible when we reclaim it. Your badge will give you power, but your humanity, that gives you strength." The applause was thunderous. In his cell, Barrett wiped tears from his eyes as Dylan squeezed his shoulder. At the academy, Judge Thompson embraced his son, their years of work toward reform finally bearing fruit. Later that evening, Marcus returned to the Oakwood Community Center. The basketball court where everything had changed was full of kids playing, a police officer joining their game, everyone laughing beneath the setting sun. He picked up a ball, his scared hand remembering the familiar texture. Taking a shot, Marcus watched the ball arc perfectly through the net. Some things hadn't changed. Some things had changed forever. And in that delicate balance between memory and progress, between justice and healing, a new chapter was being written. One scarred hand, one reformed policy, one changed heart at a time.